You're joining us to talk about the all-important subject of budgeting. And this is long overdue. I mean, I don't think there's anything more essential to the financial planning process than budgeting. I'll also say, it's common for us during these knowledge series to remind you that if you want to speak to us one-on-one afterwards, if you want to spend time on whatever subject was covered in this knowledge series, to call Dave and just set up the time to do so. And in this case, I'd expand that to say, if any of you have terrific budgeting ideas that have worked well for you, sort of client testimonials, you're encouraged to send those in to Dave. We like to get a lot of ideas from our clients that we could pass on to other people. But in lieu of that, we're going to give you our thoughts on budgeting tonight. And if we have time, we'll introduce one of the tools that we believe can be a big aid in helping you improve your budgeting process. And Ryan Breen will present that. So budgeting, clearly, if your current income is tight to your actual expenses, then budgeting certainly is an absolutely necessary task, because you need to know that all of your financial needs are being served. During the accumulation period of your life, you can certainly do without budgeting if your income is clearly and sustainably well above your fixed and discretionary income. But even then, if you're a high wage earner and budgeting doesn't really is not truly needed, it's still important to become a budget-driven person, because it becomes a vital part of the your financial health and viability in retirement, at which point you're on more of a fixed income. And as a quick aside, I could tell you that most folks, pre-retirement and in full retirement, they spend most of their efforts on the accumulation side of the equation. How much do I need to retire comfortably? How can I grow my assets more? These kinds of things. How can I generate more income? But much less effort is made on the expense side. And the problem with that kind of overweight is that you get to a point in your life where you're unable to exert as much control over the accumulation phase of your life as you want to, but you can always control the expense side if longevity of money is important to you. So budgeting will help address that and build up your skill set on the expenses side. So, okay, back to budgeting. The word budget comes from the Latin bulga, which was defined as a leather bag and then later expanded to mean a container or containers into which items are organized and held. And this is essentially what zero-based budgeting is all about. Zero-based budgeting. In a zero-based budget process, every single dollar of your income is assigned to a specific expense, leaving you at the end of each period, whether that's monthly, quarterly, or annually, leaving you with a balance of zero. So every dollar that comes in has a purpose, has a job, has a goal. No income is left hiding or getting mindlessly spent. The zero-based budgeting method requires that you anticipate all of your upcoming expenses so that you can allocate your income to those appropriate expenses. This method ensures that you have a plan for each dollar of your income and reduces the chance that you'll make impulse purchases, at least in theory. The most important element to me of the zero-based budget process is that it includes assigning income to a savings expense, perhaps even multiple savings expenses. Certainly, retirement is a saving expense, but also other medium-term goals. The change in optics here to say that your savings is an expense line item, that change in optics is that you consider your savings as an expense that has to be planned for rather than more of a, hey, what's left over goes into savings. In fact, we contend that that retirement bucket, that hard to achieve retirement bucket that you need in your future should be considered no less of an installment payment as your mortgage or college savings. One of the zero-based budgeting is a big thing with Fidelity Wealth Management and self-help gurus like Dave Ramsey. And I read a testimonial from the Fidelity Wealth Management website, and it says zero-based budgeting takes you from wondering where your money went to telling it where you want your money to go. And I think this perspective is empowering and should help you save more. So that's the predicate. That's the idea of zero-sum budgeting. My apologies. So how does it work? So rather than going into it in some kind of a hypothetical, to illustrate how it works, I'm going to share with you or take you through a stripped down review of my personal household budget. All right. So step number one in the zero sum budgeting is to know your income. It's sort of Captain Obvious. So you want to aggregate, total all your income sources and create your gross pay, your gross compensation, your gross income monthly. So for me and my wife works at a middle school in our town. She's a W-2 employee, has no other income. I'm self-employed, so I have, a varying income. And that's it. We don't have a trust fund. We don't have portfolio income. I don't have a side job. I'm a 24/7 wealth management business owner. You arrive at that total gross monthly income. Second part of this, for anybody who's on a W-2, is I place the W-2 deductions in my wife's Board of Ed payroll into their relevant expense line items. In effect, we want to unbundle that W-2. We want to undouble that pay stub, rather. So in her pay stub, she has a copay to her pension. We take that out. In my spreadsheet, I put our gross monthly income as a top line number, no deductions. Then I unbundle the deductions and put them in their expense line items. So she co-pays her pension. I take that out and I put it into retirement savings. She has a deduction for group term life insurance. So I take that out and put it in our life insurance line item or life insurance bucket. She has a deduction for her HSA, her health savings account. I take that out and put it into our health insurance line item. And then her state and federal and FICA taxes, she doesn't pay Social Security, go into our bucket for taxes and financial responsibilities. So we start right there, know your income, put all the deductions into their expense line items just to get those buckets starting to fill. So once you know your income, you move on to expensing. So expensing, as you can see there, the optics change here, which is so critical, is to put yourself first. This is something you hear all the time, whether you're using this zero-sum budgeting or the 50-30-20 rule. You always want to be putting yourself first. If I can anchor my savings rate, then I have to deal with budgeting everything else on the expense side. But I treat, and by the way, because I've listed listed this in order of priority. So I want my highest priority to be the savings. So I put that first and I anchor that down. So for us, my wife and I, Pamela and I figured out through our retirement income illustrator that I want my retirement savings or need my retirement savings to be at 15%. So my wife and I each max out our respective retirement plan limits, our contribution limits, and we're fortunate enough to be able to do that. And if we take that total retirement contribution as a percentage of our gross income, it is not 15%. It equals less than 15% of our income, which is fortunate. So then I add a certain amount of money to our Roth accounts to bring the total retirement savings rate up to 15% because that's my target. And that leads me to a wonderful nuance, which is to continue to build my tax-free money. On top of that, we target 4% for liquidity savings. This just means, that proverbial buffer that everybody talks about where your boiler breaks, you need a new car, you take a vacation, you need to gift to your children or help them out, that this liquidity is building. And we target that as 4% of our gross income. And we execute it by, not fully, but mostly, I do an automatic transfer from our joint checking into a Schwab joint brokerage and put it in a high yield money market. And then my wife has an automatic transfer out of her payroll to her teacher's credit union. And that gets us almost all the way to the 4%. So put yourself first, hit your retirement bucket, your retirement targets, if you're able, and then you move on from there because savings is number one. Then we get into fixed expenses. And this is no different than anybody else, but I'll give you a little color on my life. So we have a mortgage that's fixed. Can't change it. I mean, we could refinance it from 3.25 to 6.5, but no one would do that. So we're keeping our mortgage that's fixed. We have a home equity line, small, but it's there. So that's fixed to a degree. We have our federal taxes. And I actually put that in an expense item because I want to unpack that too. If we go back to the first line item where I described how we take my wife's W-2 and we take out the deductions and put them in an expense item. Part of that is because I want to see and be reminded what they are. Imagine we've had clients where we look at their pay stub and it shows, I keep using the word W-2. That's wrong. I meant the pay stub. So I apologize for that. So we look at the pay stub and we've seen pay stubs for other clients. We find Christmas club deductions going into a 1% bank account. We've seen life insurance that's more expensive than what you can get in the private market. We've seen overly expensive short-term disability. I mean, you want to unpack those expenses so you could see if there's anything you could do to improve it. So it's the same way on the taxes. I put my federal and state and FICA taxes into the budget line item for that category. And it just reminds me, man, it makes me nauseous how much we pay in taxes. Maybe I can take more time earlier in the year to see if there's more that I can do to offset that charitably, property, donations, things that I could do to help the cause. Our auto loans are fixed. Our property and casualty insurance, homeowners, auto, boat, those are fixed expenses, but I always want to look at them to see. There was a long time when my middle son, who went to graduate school in Michigan, and then we took back the kind of college rent-a-wreck car and realized we were still paying collision insurance on it. But the car is only worth like $3,000. So we took off the collision, saved like $80 a month. So we want to unpack that. Private life insurance, I pay a private life insurance policy, which soon might have enough cash value that I can turn that money towards long-term care. we have our property taxes, and a boat loan. So each of those has its own bucket in my zero sum budgeting spreadsheet. Okay. Then we get on to the variable expenses. Oil, gas, and utilities. I just used the prior 12-month average, but I want to see that, because if I'm tracking that money to get a prior 12-month average, it reminds me how much our energy bill balloons in July and August, and it tells me don't use the air conditioner in a 300 square foot room when you're not sitting there. Just a reminder to try to tighten that up. I have a line item in there that I would target. By the way, the symbol T for me means target. In other words, I'm going to put in a number that I'm targeting rather than just a number that happens to be the case. So I'm trying to tell my money where I want it to go, type of thing. But I have a line item for mortgage prepay to accelerate the pay down of my mortgage. But now I'm reducing that to zero pending having my daughter go to grad school. And I think my daughter might be on this meeting, and she was accepted into Duke. And so she's going to grad school, and we're going to support her to some degree. I mean, more than just a phone call. So dining out, we're big, we have busy lives, so we dine out a lot, and I'm going to target the expense. We spend money on the summer boating season, and I want to target kind of a number for that. Certainly entertainment, going out to shows, going into Manhattan to visit Broadway, that kind of thing. Long-term vacations. So my wife and I have a vacation that we take every 2 years. And yes, the only way that we can pay for that, because we just rarely have big chunks of money that we can throw at a vacation, is we figure out what it's going to be 2 years from now, and then we just start saving in that bucket so that the money is there when we have to make a down payment every 2 years. Food in the home, obviously a variable expense. We just take the prior 12-month average. Family gifts, we target that. That's Christmas, their birthdays. We have a couple nieces and nephews who annually do a fundraiser. Then we get to charitable gifts, and we target that. We target that based on the amount of charitable gifts that we need, so that our itemized deductions, are what they call the Schedule A, is higher than the standard deduction. So each age group has a standard deduction that's afforded to them if they don't itemize. But if we know what our charitable gifts are, whether it's cash or property, then that allows us to get a bigger deduction by itemizing. So we target those charitable gifts. Moving on. Home improvement, landscaping, target that number. If there's any big capital project that's ahead of us, like we have a chimney that's sort of breaking off and we need to probably fix the chimney. So if that was a big $20,000 project, that would have to go into the liquidity category, where we're saving every month to be able to afford that kind of lump sum outlay. Clubs and dues, subscriptions, and streaming services on TV. That's a targeted number now. It wasn't before, but it's going to be, because I've let it get out of control. Clothing, personal care. We don't really target that because we don't spend a lot. It kind of is what it is. Same with auto maintenance and gas. And now my daughter's headed off to grad school for at least 2 years. We have to target an assumed amount of money that we have to help to contribute to her overall costs. So those are my budget buckets that I have to fill with my zero sum budgeting. Savings, fixed expenses, variable expenses. You total everything up and you compare that against your total income. I did that, and the answer or the equation came out that, at least for the next 2 years, without grad school, I would have a monthly surplus with all those targets being met. I didn't fill in the numbers of each of these buckets. I kept that to myself, but I did create bona fide, legitimate numbers for each line item. And when I totaled it all up, compared it to my income, we have a $1,200 a month surplus without grad school. But for the next 2 years, while she's in grad school, we're expected to have a $500 deficit. So when I started this project, we didn't know if she was going to graduate school. Now she is. But at the time, if this exercise left me with a $1,200 month surplus, I have to put that in a line item, because your expenses and your income have to total zero. Every dollar is assigned. So where would I put that? Well, that's a champagne problem. Maybe I put 800 of it back into liquidity savings and raise my savings rate there to 5%. Maybe I put it back into mortgage repayment. Maybe I put it back into charitable endeavors. But you can't just let a surplus hang out there. You have to assign it. That's the beauty of this process. But that's not my case. For the next year, I have a legitimate $500 deficit, and I cannot leave a negative number in zero-sum budgeting. So to adjust for that, these were my initial adjustments. All right. First and foremost, I don't want to make an adjustment to my savings target. So what am I going to do? I'm going to knock off $200 a month from my dining out budget. Spend about $600 a month as it is now. So I'll knock that down $200. I cancel my HBO Max and Paramount, which I never use. That's taking $20 off my budget. I become more diligent, not watching so many movies, and get out, play more tennis, reduce my Comcast bill by $30. My summer boating thing is very discretionary. We can go to expensive places like Newport. Maybe I dial that back and just drive around to Block Island, cut $100 a month off of that, or the equivalent of $100 a month. And then I take off $150 a month for food in the home and energy use. I mean, there is no question that I could be more diligent about AC and heat in rooms that we're not in, or what have you. And you total up all these adjustments, you change those in your bucket, and now you're at a zero-sum budget, because I have offset that $500 with grad school, the $500 deficit from grad school. So hopefully that's been clear. Then what about ongoing adjustments? Well, I think monthly is a little maniacal, but certainly quarterly. You can do this exercise every quarter, and then you make adjustments. If you found that you've underspent one of your buckets by $600 over that quarter, then that $600 goes into another line item, whether it's savings or a better vacation, whatever you want, whatever your value system or your needs are at that time. So again, you're always arriving at a zero number, because everything has to be in a category. So I think quarterly is fine. So I'm going to say one more thing and then kind of pass it over to Ryan. But before I do, I want to acknowledge, this is all fine. It is academic, but it can be practical. People do this. I can do this. It just takes a little work 4 times a year. But no doubt, for people who are living paycheck to paycheck or are saving as much as they can, and they don't have the ability to raise that right now or what have you, obviously sometimes you get into a rock and a hard place and you can't do much about it. But I would still suggest everybody give a try to zero-sum budgeting and see if it offers some clarity. It identifies savings. It identifies where you're valuing your expenditures and whether you'd prioritize them to be somewhere else. So it's a good exercise. The question is, how do I do it? What's the methodology? Right? Well, certainly if anybody's been around, you know that there are a lot of fintech apps that do budgeting. The problem with a lot of the fintech apps, even the problem with the tool that Ryan's going to show you to a degree, is that it's very hard to properly categorize your expenses. I've made my own expense buckets that are unique to me. I mean, they're not unique for the majority of them, but it's hard for software-driven things to properly categorize your expenses into the right budget. So I just like to use a spreadsheet. I do this for my business bank account at the end of the year. I just export all the transactions and in a spreadsheet, and I go through and I categorize them myself, and then I sort them and sum them based on those categories that I've created and the labeling of those expense items that I've created. And it really doesn't take long. But I like to just use an old-fashioned spreadsheet. But one can go out and try different kinds of fintech apps. But the good news is you don't need to, because if you're working with Riverside Financial Group, we have our own tool that we provide to you, that we've been providing to you, whether you know about it or not, over the last 2 years. And it's called eMoney. And each of our clients has an eMoney dashboard that has wonderful budgeting functionality. And if you want to work with us to do something on a spreadsheet or use eMoney to build your version of zero-sum budgeting, or any budgeting for that matter, then we are wholeheartedly on board with helping you to do that. But for now, and before we finish this up with questions or comments, I'm going to turn it over to Ryan Breen.
I want to share with you the budgeting feature within eMoney. It is, just one of the many things that this digital tool offers. Within the budgeting section of the site, which I'll show you soon here, I just want to cover a couple things before I screen share. That being, the first step for anyone that is not on eMoney is to register for your account. We, just reach out to us if you need that link again. We can send that. Once you register and get online, you create a username and password and all that. Then the next step to use the budgeting feature is to link all your accounts. So all your operating accounts need to be linked to the site, which is just a matter of putting in your credentials for those other sites into eMoney, and then it'll pull in that data daily. So those are pretty much essential to use eMoney for budgeting. Alternatively, you could use the spreadsheet method that Charlie was talking about. Once you have linked your accounts, it is important to review how those accounts are categorized. Like some of you may have seen some of the other systems that do it, the other online tools. Sometimes it may mislabel something. So the first go around, it's important to kind of review maybe a month's worth of transactions, just go line by line. If you clearly recognize something that's wrong, you can go in and relabel it, and there's a little box when you relabel it to say, relabel it to this going forward every time. So the system remembers that, hey, that purchase at Petco was not a grocery expense, it was a dog expense or pet expense, right? So just as an example there, and I have caught with clients and with myself even When you make a purchase at something like a grocery store, like if you were to use an ATM at a grocery store or get cash back from your purchase, it will keep it in that category, which may not be accurate, or which isn't accurate really. There is an ATM cash category that you could use for your budget, and you would want to assign it to that. All right, so I'm gonna pull up.
And I want to say that you may have noticed how sad I am not to have a pets category in my zero sum budgeting. I wanted a dog, but
Yeah. Well, that can all of a sudden take more of your budget, right? All right, so this is the site from your end, from the user's end, right? And this is all the main categories. You would click on spending, and then within spending, you click on budgets. It's all self-explanatory, right? So on this user interface that I'm on right now, which is actually mine, or one of the ones I have to use for this, I have not linked all my spending accounts. So I'm not pulling in all that data, but I'm going to show you kind of how you can build the budget. And then once those accounts are linked, the transactions will get assigned. So the first way you can build a budget is just to do what's called I believe they call it a single budget. Yeah, it's a single budget where you build it yourself. It's as described, you hit this plus add budget. You select a category. There's even these little drop downs where it gets a little more specific. So if you had a garbage and recycling, just apply it, whatever it is. If you have, for me, like my garbage is quarterly pay, but you would just divide it into a monthly amount just to be consistent, right? So then you just add an amount, click save, and it's added in right here. I had some other ones already kind of in here, but you would just go line by line, just like that sheet that Charlie showed, and have a category for everything. Now, as you can see here, it says $500 left, like for my gas and fuel. It says $500 left, $0 spent. Now, once you have your accounts linked and the transactions are being pulled in and the system recognizes a gas expense, it will automatically put it in here. And you can see there's this nice line graph, I guess you call it, or line bar, right? Where it is got the point at which where you have reached your budget. So throughout the course of the month, you would see this grow, and then you would see it, maybe you didn't reach it or you surpassed it, and you'll have a better sense of whether or not you're hitting your targeted budgets for each category. So that's essentially how the single budget works. Now, they also have another feature on this site, which is called auto budget. This one, it would, also take some monitoring, as with this one, as the transactions pull in, but essentially, so this here is what the screen would look like, right? It would say create an auto budget. You click that, and then it will pull in the past 6 months of transactions and categorize, and create a budget based on what your spending was. So the system will do it automatically for you. Now, since you may not have 6 months worth of spending in there yet, it may not be as accurate at first, but I would just go through line by line, take a look at everything, and just, determine the accuracy that way. All right, so another feature that I think is pretty cool about this is when you do finally have a budget made and expenses are being assigned and it's working, you've reviewed it a few times and everything is just working, it'll happen in the background as you just continue to live. You can go back and review I think, pretty telling graphs, which are helpful to me, to anyone who enjoys the visuals. And you can see kind of how you go, how you've been doing month by month. In this graph, the orange line is essentially what you spent, the blue being your budget. In this example, you could see there was 1 month when this person was under budget. Most times they've been spending a little more than what they've budgeted. So maybe they need to rein things in, or adjust their budget to be more realistic.
Mm. Yeah.
But yeah, this PDF that I'm showing kind of gives a breakdown. We can share this as well, but I can certainly jump on a call or a Zoom with anyone and just get more into the weeds with the actual budgeting e-money tool if the electronic version or route is what you're more interested in doing. But yeah, it's a great feature. It's a great tool. Takes a little bit of work, but once it gets going, I think
Well,
it's very useful.
you did a great job, and I think it's just important to wrap up with the fact that this e-money tool is not an elective subscription that you have to be involved with. We purchased this package, which has other functionality, net worth and financial planning, vaults, lots of different things, but it has this budgeting function, and each of our clients is able to tap this resource at no cost now. So it's already there. It's such a big thing, and it takes so much integration with each household that, we can't just do a 30-minute seminar and have everybody roll on with e-money. So, but we're happy to deal with everybody one-on-one. So that's that. We like to keep it to 40 minutes. We're 2 minutes over, but I wasted time talking about the trial. So it's 30 minutes, 40 minutes as the crow flies. So let's just open it up to any comments, questions. In this case, maybe just insights, a better way. Maybe some testimonial that you do budget and it helps a lot. You don't budget and you're fine. I mean, any and all, we're happy to stay and address. So open it up to you all.
I have a quick comment. This is a great tool. I think it's especially useful for young professionals to understand to pay themselves first. So the more that Riverside Financial can target young professionals to come to these series, they cannot hear it enough that they need to pay themselves first and begin planning for their retirement at the front end of their career, especially before they have kids, when savings really is impossible. So the more they can stack their Roth IRAs before, in the era before children, the better off they are. So I really hope that you guys will be able to target young professionals.
Well said. Well said. Thank you.
There is an app. There was a question here on, does eMoney have an app, or is it just a computer program? There is an app, although you kind of have to, right now, you have to make the app yourself. Where there's just a couple steps. You go to the site and then you have to kind of bookmark it on your phone. There's no app on the App Store yet, but supposedly there will be. But right now you just, you create the app on your phone as kind of like a quick link. You may have done that before. And then it is very mobile friendly though. It's not, the formatting is perfect. You don't have to like zoom in and zoom out or anything. And the menu looks a little different, but you can figure it out.
Does it come with an external magnifying glass, or how does that work?
I think if you choose large font, it'll make it bigger, maybe. I'm not sure.
All right. Well, we're still here, open to any questions or comments, but this is audio recorded. It'll be on our website, and we can share it with anybody who needs to hear this. And we'll post it on our website so people can just get a link, but good stuff.
Great.
All right. Thank you for coming, and we'll send out our next knowledge series, and hopefully it'll be something that's impactful to you. And thank you for visiting with us.